This Peavey Classic 30 just came in, and the tag just says no signal. So let's see what's up with this. As you can see, there is this metal panel here, and ostensibly to protect the tubes. That's not going to do anything whatsoever. And it's broken on this left edge. And it's installed in such a way to make it very difficult to uninstall. But in this case, it is already broken. So I'm just going to warp it a little bit more and get that out. And then we'll see why there's no signal. I don't think this is factory unless Peavey got a deal on something from Grandma's Boutique. The biggest flaw of the Classic 30 and Delta Blues, aside from some aspects of the circuit that aren't great, as I think I mentioned in the previous Classic 30 video, is that the tubes have no protection in transit, and they often come loose. Now, given that the tubes are in series in terms of the heater situation of this circuit, that's the Classic 30, Classic 50, and the Delta Blues. Maybe some other Peaveys from that era that are no longer used very much. It's not uncommon to lose signal in mysterious ways. Good Lord. Let me find my power screwdriver and speed this process up. Well, as I mentioned, this series does not protect the tubes in transit, and this was not going to do a damn thing. So that's going to go by the wayside. Let me get this last screw out with that little bit of metal from the screen. Now let's look at this. We've got 3 JJ EL84s, and one of these things is not like the other. So let's see what's in this one. You can see they got these tube clamps to keep them from vibrating. That tube says nothing on it whatsoever. So a JJ failed, someone popped in this generic. In general, you never want to replace just one tube. Optimally, you would replace all 4. You can at least replace them in pairs. So for what I'm going to do before I power it up, because I want each side of the output to pull about the same amount of current, I'm going to take this JJ out and put it to the side carefully. And I'm going to pop in another pair of EL84s that I happen to have handy. Let's get the pins correct. I'm putting this pair of Mullard. And while it's nice to have all 4 tubes match each other, if this pair is matched and this pair is matched, even if this and this don't match and this don't match, this side will have a certain current draw, this side will have another current draw, and with the cathode bias, it ought to work. So let's plug it into the wall now and confirm that we have no signal, and confirm that the speaker leads are connected. Because it just has these little quick connects, and sometimes those come loose. Those feel all right. Let me turn on my current limiter just in case something's squirrely. All right, the amp is powering on. Let me turn the settings to something sane. And see if we get any signal whatsoever. I hear hum, but not a lot. Indeed, no sound. So the next thing I want to do is I want to look and see if all the preamp tubes are heating. I see glow on the filaments for the power tubes. I don't see any filament glow on the preamp tubes. Now, if one of these tubes is bad and it doesn't heat, then the others won't heat. So I'm going to replace them one at a time. And if this doesn't do it, then I will open up the amp and see what's going on. Now I'm just going to grab whatever 12x7 types I have around for this. I'm not trying to do anything other than make sure that the tubes are heating. I don't care about the signal or even really AT7 versus AX7 at this point. I just want to see if we just have a heater issue. Because if it's just one bad tube throwing off the preamp's heating, then I don't need to open this up and do a full repair on this amp necessarily. I just need to find the replacement tube that's necessary. All right, change that, no heat. Wait, this one's got a filament glow. I can see that one's got a glow. This one does not. And this one's got a slight glow, so it might just be a bad G1. In this light, it's really hard to see filament glow. Some preamp tubes you can definitely see, some you cannot. I see the filaments lighting up on these. I think I see it on this one now. But I'm not hearing anything. All right, so that's not what the issue is. So let's open this amp up and see what the issue is. Okay, the first thing I see is that this fuse right here has opened. I've already discharged the amp. There's no voltage present, so don't touch something inside an amp like you just saw me do, and it's not plugged into the wall. So I've got two fuses here. I can see that this one is open, but you can't always see it, so sometimes it's good to measure. So 5 meg, that's open. Let's see if this one's any good. Yeah, that one's good. That reads continuity. So I've not called up the schematic for this yet. Let's just change this, see what the value of this fuse is. Now the issue is it just a bad fuse or is something blowing the fuse? And what fuse is it? This is a 1 amp. That's the HT supply. And the things which blow HT supplies are often output tubes. Now, here are the stock output tubes. You got this JJ here, this JJ here. Let me get the focus to be my friend. Now, what's the difference in these JJs that you can see? This one has a nice red label, and this one, the label has begun to turn brown. This tube has been much hotter than this tube. Let's see about the other one. All right, so red, red, that's good. Brown, it's been too hot, and remember one had been replaced with this generic, which also has some heat discoloration there on its plate. So what I think happened is the JJs, one of those JJs is bad, probably the one with that dark brown, and I don't know whether that was the one I pulled before to put in a pair or not, and that blew that fuse. So I'm going to put these JJ that are still red back in the amp, along with that pair of Mullards, and replace this fuse, and bring it up on my current limiter, and see if things hold, if that amp starts to draw too much current from the wall, or if that fuse blows again, then I know a pair of JJs is bad. So this is not an expensive amplifier, it does not have a huge resale value. So everything I can do to both keep the repair bill low while making sure that I have actually repaired it and that this problem will not re-exhibit is good. And then we'll talk about other things to look at in this amp if the fuse were to blow with new tubes. That can happen. We'll get there in a moment. Okay, a new slow below 1 amp fuse has been installed here, and the tubes are back in place. Now, before I power this up, these resistors here are 5-watt screen grid resistors for the inner pair of EL84s. The outer pair does not have any screen grid resistance, and these, while they're present for the inner pair, are vastly underrated. They're 100 ohms, so the inner pair of EL84s in this amp have inadequate screen grid protection, and the outer pair has none. So that's something that I often change in one of these when I pull the board. The other thing to watch out for in this series is that all these little pins connecting the 3 PCBs together in this U shape, there can be breaks there, and these 2 resistors here generate a lot of heat and kind of roast the board, and I can see a little discoloration here as if that has been happening. Now that will not affect the output tubes. That's a separate issue, but the screen grids can contribute to output tube issues. Anyway, I've got this on a current limiter. I'm going to power it up, and let's see if this fuse maintains, if it holds it. As those tubes heat up, that fuse may or may not blow, and I may or may not have excessive current. We will find out. Or it's possible that that old fuse was damaged by that old tube, which is no longer in there, in which case we can just put some new tubes in and not do any subsequent work to the amp unless the owner wants some preventative maintenance as far as output tubes go. I hear good things as I just touch the guitar. Make sure the reverb is working. Yep. That hum was present because the reverb tank is very close to the transformer. It's on the other side of the chassis on the bench. Now this amp does have a noticeable hum, so it needs a new quad of output tubes because the JJs that are remaining probably have had a lot of heat as well. Now, that last one I did a couple weeks back where I replaced these resistors off the board to mitigate that heat, and I gave all 4 output tubes a 1K grid, screen grid resistor as opposed to 2 of them having none and 2 of them having 100 ohms. The owner reported back that he loves the amp, and he and his buddies who've played it a bunch of blues jams and such say it is the best sounding Classic 30 they've ever played. What did I do? And all I did was do amp design 101. Nothing earth shaking, nothing that really deserves to feed my ego. It's just that I was looking at what do we need to do to make output tubes last, as opposed to what do we need to do to make this amp really cheap to produce, which was, I think, the guiding mantra at Peavey when this was designed. So I'm going to let the owner know what I found and get a new matched quad of output tubes for this, and I will offer him the option of having me take this apart and make it last a lot longer, though that does increase the labor cost. So with an inexpensive amp like this, quite honestly, you have to say, yeah, EL84s won't last as long, but they're not that expensive. I'm not going to have anything done to the amp and spend money making inexpensive tubes last longer. But I will stress to him the importance of replacing in quads, not individual output tubes.